My husband named our baby after his ex while I was under anesthesia and said, "You'll get over it." 2 years later, he learned his ex named her child after me and asked, "Is this a joke?" This isn't just a story about a bad breakup, it's about the day I woke up from anesthesia, exhausted and overwhelmed, only to realize the man I loved had branded our newborn daughter with his ex-girlfriend's name. The betrayal hit me harder than any pain from childbirth, and it was just the beginning of a nightmare that would expose the true monster lurking beneath my husband's charming facade. I remember coming to, the sterile scent of the hospital room filling my nostrils. My body ached, every muscle screaming from 19 hours of labor and an emergency C-section where I'd nearly bled out. But the pitying stares from everyone in the room, they were worse than any physical pain. "Is my baby okay?" I whispered, my voice raw, a primal fear clutching my chest. "Please don't let it be a stillbirth." No one spoke. My own mother, usually so strong, finally managed, "The baby's fine." But her voice was wrong. Everything felt wrong. Then the nurse handed me my daughter. My perfect, tiny baby girl. And the first thing I saw was the name bracelet, Jessica Marie. My stomach plummeted. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. Jessica Marie. That was my husband's ex-girlfriend's name. What the hell is this? I heard a voice I barely recognized as my own crack. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, the father of our child, stood in the corner, meticulously studying his phone, as if it held the answers to the universe. "Look at me," I pleaded silently, then again, out loud. When he finally lifted his gaze, his face was utterly blank. No remorse. No explanation. Just a cold, empty stare. "You'll get over it," he mumbled. "It's just a name." Just a name? While doctors were fighting to save my life, while I was literally unconscious, this man, my husband, was scribbling his ex's name onto our daughter's birth certificate. My mother, bless her heart, actually lunged at him. It took 2 nurses to hold her back. He just left. Didn't say another word. I didn't see him for 3 days. 3 endless, agonizing days of me sobbing every time I looked at my beautiful, innocent baby girl, knowing she'd been branded like property with another woman's name. When I finally came home, the birth certificate sat on the kitchen table, mocking me with its bold, official script. "Why?" I begged him, my voice hoarse from crying. "It's a common name, honey. You're just being hormonal." The words hit me like a slap. I knew if I stayed there, if I kept listening to him, I'd do something I'd regret. But I was so confused. This was the same man who taught me how to love again, whose arms felt more like home than any house ever could. But that man was a ghost. I filed for divorce that very same day. I moved back in with my parents, and the first thing I did was start the legal process to change her name. He fought me on every single thing, every detail, every shared possession, except custody. He didn't even pretend to want our daughter. And then, 6 months into the divorce proceedings, everything clicked. It was an accident. His lawyer sent mine the wrong folder. Inside, neatly organized, were text messages from the week I gave birth. And hey, if you're finding yourself completely engrossed in this wild ride, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, the story only gets crazier from here. The texts detailed a chilling blackmail plot. His ex, Jessica, had been holding something over him from his bachelor party. His best friend had sexually assaulted a waitress, and my husband had helped cover it up, paid her off, threatened her, even deleted security footage. Jessica had videos of him bragging about it. She demanded he name our baby after her, or she'd release everything. I sat in that lawyer's office, reading those words, feeling like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The man I had loved, the father of my child, chose to protect himself. He chose to let our daughter pay the price, rather than face the consequences of his own despicable actions. He could have been a criminal behind bars, but instead, he made our baby a pawn. I was curled up on my mom's lap, tears streaming down my face, when my phone rang. It was Jessica's lawyer. She wants to meet you, the voice said, as if she deserved my time. Every bone in my body screamed no. But something inside me clicked. I needed to look her in the eye. I needed to understand what kind of woman does something like this. We met at a Starbucks. She looked as nervous as I felt. The first thing she said, her hands shaking around her coffee cup, was, I didn't think he'd actually do it. She told me she threw up when she heard he really put her name on the birth certificate. I realized if he could do that to his own baby, to you while you were literally unconscious from giving birth, she said, what else was he capable of? She told me everything. How he'd slept with her throughout our engagement, promised to leave me. How she'd found out about the bachelor party assault from the victim herself, a friend of a friend. We talked for 4 hours, two strangers brought together by a shared manipulator. She even invited me over to her place. We were just two women who had been used, lied to, and manipulated by the same pathological coward. We started texting after that, not frequently, just checking in. Trauma bonding, my therapist called it later. The day my daughter's name change was legally finalized to Elise Jasmine, he somehow found out instantly. You vindictive witch, his text read. Erasing Jessica from my daughter's name. I'll take you back to court. I just forwarded it to Jessica. That same day, flowers arrived at my door with a card, to new beginnings. A year after the divorce, Jessica sent me an ultrasound photo. It's a girl, she wrote. I've been thinking about names. I want to name her after someone who taught me what strength really looks like. Would you be okay if I named her Jasmine? I actually laughed. A full, deep belly laugh, the kind that clears your soul. Then I texted back, I'd be honored. The week before she gave birth, he started texting us both. I know you're planning something. This is coordinated harassment. Jessica and I would screenshot and compare his increasingly unhinged messages. He knew something was coming. And within 3 minutes of her posting the birth announcement on her social media, complete with the baby's name, he was calling me. I almost didn't answer, but Jessica was right there, sitting in her hospital bed. Answer it, she whispered. Put him on speaker. Hello, lover, I sang, my voice dripping with venom. What is new with you? What he said next made me realize he was capable of far more than just covering up his friend's assault. His voice dropped to a flat, emotionless tone that was somehow worse than any yelling. I know you're at St. Mary's Hospital, 4th floor, room 412. I know Jessica just gave birth 6 hours ago. I know exactly where you both are right now. My hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Jessica's face went bone white. There was no way he could know those specific details. No way. Stay away from us, I'm. Anneged, then hung up. Jessica grabbed my arm. How does he know where I am? She whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't tell anyone except my mom, and she wouldn't. Her voice trailed off as we both realized the horrible truth. He'd been watching us. Tracking us. Maybe for weeks, or months. I hit the call button for the nurse. I need hospital security immediately, I said. She must have heard the urgency, the terror in my voice, because she didn't ask questions. She just picked up the phone. 2 security officers arrived within minutes. We explained everything, the blackmail, the divorce, the name situation, and now this chilling phone call. Has he made other threats? The officer asked. I pulled up my phone and showed him the texts, you vindictive witch. I know you're planning something. This is coordinated harassment. His expression grew more serious with each message. Have you filed a police report yet? I shook my head. We need to do that first thing tomorrow, he said. But right now, let me put privacy flags on this room and update our no-visitor list. No one gets in here without Mrs. Jessica's explicit permission, and we'll have extra patrols on this floor tonight. After they left, Jessica and I just sat there, stunned. Her newborn, Jasmine, slept peacefully in the bassinet, completely unaware that her mother was being stalked by a man who had already proven he would hurt anyone to protect himself. I texted my therapist, he knows where we are. Everything. I'm scared. She responded within 10 minutes. Come see me first thing tomorrow. Bring all the evidence. It's time to involve law enforcement properly. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound. The next morning, after dropping Elise Jasmine off at my mom's, I drove straight to the police station. My hands were still shaking as I walked through those doors, clutching a folder stuffed with printed screenshots, every threatening text, every message where he mentioned locations he shouldn't have known, a timeline I'd created showing his increasingly specific knowledge of our whereabouts. The intake officer looked bored until I said stalking, blackmail, and assault cover-up. Then she sat up straighter and called for a detective. Detective Colin Anderson was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp, observant eyes. In a small interview room that smelled of old coffee, I laid out all my evidence. He asked careful questions, dates, times, incidents. When do you think the surveillance started? He asked. I thought back. Maybe around the time Jessica got pregnant. He started knowing things he shouldn't have known. Like when I changed Elise Jasmine's daycare, he texted about it the same day, even though I hadn't told him. Detective Anderson made notes. What devices do you use regularly? He asked. Phone, laptop, tablet. He explained that while my documented patterns were good, we needed to find out how he was tracking us. I want you and Jessica to check your phones carefully. Look for unfamiliar apps, weird settings, anything that seems off. Check your location services. That afternoon, Jessica and I meticulously went through every setting on our phones in her hospital room. It took almost an hour before Jessica found it. Her location services showed sharing enabled with an email address neither of us recognized. My phone had the same thing. Some unknown account had access to our exact locations, at all times. My stomach churned. He'd been watching us move around the city like dots on a map, knowing where we went, who we saw, everything. We immediately disabled all location sharing, changed every password, and I called Detective Anderson. That's good evidence, he said. But I'm going to recommend you both get completely new phones with new numbers. If he had access to install that tracking, he might have other ways in that you haven't found yet. The thought of a new phone made my chest tight. Single mom, legal fees, therapy costs, but he was right. I couldn't use a device he might be monitoring. My mom drove me to the phone store. The total still made me wince, but walking out, knowing he couldn't track this device, was worth every penny. I went back to the hospital and stayed overnight in Jessica's room. These first vulnerable nights after birth felt dangerous. We took turns sleeping, one of us always awake, keeping watch. Every footstep, every elevator ding, made us jump. Holding baby Jasmine, this tiny, perfect person named after me, after the strength Jessica said I'd shown her, the weight of keeping both our daughters safe felt crushing. 3 days later, Detective Anderson called my new number. I'm opening a formal harassment investigation, he said. I need you and Jessica to come down to the station so we can document the full scope of everything. The blackmail folder from your divorce, the current stalking, all of it together creates a stronger case than either issue alone. We met him the next morning. Jessica brought copies of the original blackmail evidence, the texts where my ex bragged about covering up the assault, the videos she'd used to force him to name my daughter. He reviewed it all. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading, would you be willing to reach out to the woman who was assaulted at the bachelor party? Her testimony could be crucial if this escalates to criminal charges. I know it's a sensitive ask. Jessica and I looked at each other. We knew the waitress through mutual friends. Jessica had the contact for the friend who'd originally told her about the assault. We can try, Jessica said slowly. But we need to be really careful about how we approach her. She's already been through so much. Detective Anderson nodded. Absolutely. Make it clear she's under no pressure. We're not asking her to go public or testify in court right now. Just wondering if she'd be willing to speak with me confidentially. That evening, Jessica composed a careful message. She wrote and rewrote it 5 times. We weren't asking the waitress to relive her trauma publicly, just if she'd talk confidentially with a detective about what my ex-husband had done. We emphasized she was under zero pressure. Jessica hit send, and we waited. The response came 2 days later, through the mutual friend. The waitress appreciated being asked respectfully. She wasn't ready to engage with law enforcement now, but she did confirm, off the record, that my ex had personally handed her the cash payment, threatened her to keep quiet, and stood by watching his best friend delete the security footage. It wasn't the answer we'd hoped for, but Detective Anderson said even this second-hand confirmation helped establish the pattern of behavior. My ex wasn't just someone who made a bad choice, he was someone who consistently chose to protect himself, no matter who got hurt. The investigation was officially open. For the first time since I'd woken up from anesthesia to see Jessica's name on my daughter's bracelet, I felt like someone with actual authority was finally taking this seriously. The next step was coordinating with my divorce lawyer. Together with Detective Anderson, they drafted a formal cease and desist letter. It warned my ex that any further contact or tracking would result in immediate legal action. They kept it deliberately vague about what evidence we had. The goal was to make his paranoia work against him. The letter went out by certified mail. I thought maybe it would scare him. I was wrong. 2 days later, a process server showed up at my mom's house. My ex had filed an emergency motion for temporary custody modification. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the papers. He was claiming I was experiencing a postpartum mental health crisis, making erratic decisions that endangered our daughter. His lawyer had submitted cherry-picked text messages where I'd mentioned feeling overwhelmed, where I'd said I was exhausted, where I'd admitted to my therapist that some days were really hard. They'd twisted every normal human emotion into evidence of instability. I couldn't breathe. The hearing was scheduled in just 3 weeks. 3 weeks for a judge to decide if I was fit to keep my daughter. What if the judge believed him? What if they looked at me and saw exactly what he wanted them to see? A hysterical woman, too emotional to think clearly. I sank onto the couch, and a full-blown panic attack hit. My mom found me like that, pulling me into her arms. She didn't tell me to calm down, she just held me until the worst of it passed. Then we made a practical plan. Document everything. Character witnesses. A letter from my therapist. My therapist's letter was a lifeline. She explained that my emotional responses were completely normal reactions to betrayal, blackmail, and ongoing harassment, not signs of mental instability. She emphasized that seeking therapy and building support systems demonstrated healthy coping, not crisis. Jessica called that same afternoon. She'd heard about the custody motion through the legal grapevine. Before I could even ask, she offered to testify about his controlling behavior, the stalking, everything she'd witnessed. She was barely 2 weeks postpartum, still recovering from her own delivery, but she was willing to stand with me. I cried with gratitude. But I knew we needed more. I'd been following an investigative reporter, Judy Rice, who covered similar stories about men using family court to continue abuse. I sent her a careful email, explaining the basics, asking if she'd meet. She responded within hours, agreeing to coffee. Judy was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and a notebook already open. I walked her through the entire timeline, waking up to Jessica's name, the divorce, the blackmail, our unlikely friendship, the stalking, this custody fight. Judy took careful notes. I'd brought copies of everything, the blackmail folder, texts, police reports, the tracking evidence. She explained she'd publish without real names, focusing on the pattern of coercive control, but warned of backlash and how it might affect the custody case. I sat with those concerns for a long moment. Then I made my decision. I'd share everything, under one condition: she had to run it all past her legal team before publication, to ensure we weren't creating problems for the criminal investigation or the custody case. She agreed. We shook hands. This wasn't just about my personal battle anymore. It was about shining a light on a system that let men like my ex manipulate and control even after separation. That determination lasted until I got home and checked my calendar. The custody hearing was in 2 weeks. My mom couldn't get off work. I couldn't bring Elise Jasmine to court. I started texting everyone. Person number 6, Sarah from my prenatal class, immediately offered. I sat on my bed and cried, overwhelmed by how many people had shown up for me. My phone rang. Detective Anderson. Calls from detectives never mean good news, but sometimes they mean progress. He got straight to the point. The judge had approved his warrant to search my ex's devices. They'd found enough evidence of stalking patterns and the connection to the assault cover-up to justify it. The next day dragged. I kept checking my phone. What if they found nothing? What if he'd deleted everything? My phone finally rang at 4:30. Detective Anderson sounded different this time, more serious. They found purchase records for tracking software, dated 6 months ago, right when Jessica first told me she was pregnant. And a hidden AirTag, tucked into the inner pocket of my diaper bag. The same bag I'd been using for weeks, the one I took everywhere with Elise Jasmine. My hands started shaking. He'd been tracking me this whole time. Knowing exactly where I went, who I saw, what I did. Detective Anderson said my ex was claiming he had no idea how it got there, that Jessica must have planted it to frame him. It was such obvious garbage, I actually laughed. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived by courier. Inside, a letter from my ex's lawyer. It was bad. Really bad. It accused Jessica of fabricating evidence, coordinating a harassment campaign, and attempting to destroy his reputation. It threatened to file criminal harassment charges against her if she continued working with me. It made it sound like we were running some conspiracy. I forwarded it to Emmeline Rogers, the civil attorney Judy suggested. She called an hour later, already having drafted a response. Her timeline showed the tracking software purchases happened 4 months before Jessica and I ever met face to face. His own purchase records proved his theory impossible. She pointed out his lawyer was now threatening a victim of stalking, which wouldn't look good in court. We should use this momentum to file for a restraining order right away, she said. We had documented stalking, threatening texts, unhinged behavior. The judge would likely grant a temporary order immediately. I met Emmeline at the courthouse the next morning. 3 hours later, the judge signed the temporary restraining order. He had to stay 500 feet away from me, Jessica, and both our daughters. No contact. No showing up at places he knew we'd be. Violation meant immediate arrest. I called Jessica from the courthouse steps. She cried. Relief crying. The kind that comes when you've been holding your breath for so long you forget what normal breathing feels like. We were both on that order now. Both protected. Both able to prove his behavior had crossed legal lines. For 3 days, nothing happened. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't show up anywhere. I started to think maybe it had actually scared him. Then I got the call from Elise Jasmine's daycare director. Her voice was tight. My ex had just walked into the lobby. Demanding to see his daughter, claiming parental rights, saying the restraining order didn't apply. The director had refused, kept him in the lobby, and called the police and me. I grabbed my keys, driving 20 over the speed limit. What if he pushed past her? What if he grabbed Elise Jasmine and ran? I pulled into the parking lot to find 2 police cars already there. I ran inside, shaking with terror and rage. My ex stood near the front desk. If 2 officers. The daycare director calmly explained he'd arrived during morning drop-off, gotten aggressive, refused to leave when she saw the restraining order note. The officer with the tablet looked up. He'd pulled up the restraining order. My ex had approached within the 500-foot restriction. Security cameras had footage. Clear violation. The officer walked over and told him he was under arrest. I watched his face change. Confusion first, then anger, then something that looked almost like fear. The officer read him his rights as the cuffs went on. My ex kept saying this was ridiculous, that he just wanted to see his daughter, that I'd poisoned everyone against him. They led him outside. I stood by the window, watching them put him in the back seat. My daughter's father. The man I'd married. Now arrested for stalking and violating a protective order. I felt relief, vindication, that the system was finally taking this seriously. But underneath it all was this deep sadness. This was Elise Jasmine's dad. Someday she'd ask questions. Someday I'd have to explain why her father wasn't around. The director touched my arm. Elise Jasmine was safe. I went to see her. She looked up, smiled that huge toddler smile that makes everything else fade away. I sat on the floor, helping her stack blocks. My hands had finally stopped shaking. That evening, Detective Anderson called. The restraining order violation was a misdemeanor. My ex would likely be released within 24 hours. No guarantee he'd be held longer. You need to stay extra careful for the next few days, he said. Maybe consider staying somewhere he doesn't know about. I hung up and immediately texted Jessica. She called back in seconds. My apartment, she said. You and Elise Jasmine can stay as long as you need. We'd be together. Both our daughters in one place where we can watch out for each other. Jessica's apartment became our temporary safe house. It felt surreal to be hiding from someone who'd once promised to protect me, the man who'd stood at an altar and vowed to love and honor me. Now I was barricading myself in a friend's apartment with security cameras on the doors and pepper spray in my purse. Jessica and I took turns staying up late, just being present with each other. Two women manipulated by the same person, two mothers protecting their daughters. 3 days later, Judy's article went live on a respected online magazine. When family courts become weapons, how abusers use custody battles to continue control. My story was there, buried in careful, anonymized language. But I recognized every beat of my own nightmare. The article talked about 3 different women, different details, but the same patterns of manipulation and legal harassment. I read it twice, then a third time. My story wasn't unique. That hurt and helped at the same time. Jessica read over my shoulder, squeezed my hand when we got to the part about coerced naming decisions and blackmail. The comment section filled up fast, person after person sharing their own experiences with ex-partners who weaponized custody proceedings. It made me feel less alone than I had in months. My phone buzzed. Emmeline. Her voice tight. She'd received a cease and desist from my ex's lawyer within hours of the article publishing. They were threatening a defamation lawsuit. Truth is an absolute defense, Emmeline calmly stated. We have extensive documentation. His lawyer was bluffing, trying to intimidate us into silence. This is actually a good sign, she said. It means the article hit close enough to home that he felt threatened. The custody modification hearing happened the following week. I walked into that courtroom carrying a 3-inch binder stuffed with evidence, my therapist's letter, character witness statements, the police report from the RO violation, screenshots of threatening texts. My ex sat across the room, looking furious and cornered. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, meticulously reviewed my binder. She asked about the stalking, the tracking, the naming of my daughter, the blackmail. His lawyer tried to interrupt, tried to paint me as delusional, in a postpartum crisis. The judge cut him off. Seeking therapy demonstrates responsibility, not crisis. His lawyer's face went red. After hearing testimony from both sides, she announced her ruling: modified custody, supervised visitation only, at an approved facility with a trained monitor. She cited serious concerns about his pattern of harassment and the restraining order violation. She extended the restraining order for a full year, warning him any further violations would mean immediate jail time and potential termination of parental rights. His face went from white to gray. For the first time, he looked like he finally understood that his actions had real consequences. Walking out of that courthouse felt like surfacing after being underwater too long. The sunlight seemed brighter. I could breathe fully. I knew it wasn't over, but I'd won this round. Elise Jasmine was safe. I was safe. Jessica met me on the steps. We just held each other, two women who'd survived the same predator, standing together in the sunlight outside a courthouse that had finally protected us. Emmeline joined us, with news about the threatened defamation lawsuit. She'd filed an anti-SLAPP motion. Confident it will succeed, she said. But warned legal fees were adding up quickly. My retainer was almost gone. That night, after putting Elise Jasmine to bed, I opened my laptop and started looking for freelance work. Graphic design, content writing, anything I could do in the evenings. The financial strain was exhausting, but safety and stability were worth it. 2 days later, Jessica texted about a support group for women dealing with controlling ex-partners. I almost said no, but something made me agree. Walking into that room of 8 women, all looking as nervous and exhausted as I felt, was eye-opening. Different details, different names, but the same patterns of control, manipulation, using the legal system to hurt us. When it was my turn, I told them everything. Nobody looked shocked. They just nodded, understanding completely. Driving home, I felt less alone than I had in months. The next morning, Detective Anderson called. The DA was focusing on obstruction of justice charges for destroying security footage and threatening the waitress. The original assault was beyond the statute of limitations. It wasn't the full accountability I wanted, but it was something. 3 days later, he called again. The waitress had reached out directly after seeing Judy's article. Reading about other women speaking up made her ready to give a formal statement. Her testimony was exactly the corroboration they needed. I called Jessica, and we both cried. Not sad crying, but overwhelming relief that maybe justice was finally going to happen. 6 weeks after Emmeline filed the anti-SLAPP motion, the hearing arrived. The judge granted the motion and dismissed most of the defamation claims. He even ordered my ex to pay a portion of my legal fees. 2 days later, Emile INE called with more news. Someone had anonymously forwarded Judy's article and the court documents to my ex's employer. He'd been placed on administrative leave. The first supervised visitation happened the following Tuesday. I drove Elise Jasmine there, stomach in knots. The supervisor said the visit had gone fine, but he seemed uncomfortable, awkward with basic childcare. He'd barely engaged with Elise Jasmine. I've seen this pattern before, the supervisor said. Parents who don't actually want custody, but fight for it out of spite or control. Hearing that made me sad for Elise Jasmine, but also validated my instinct that he never truly wanted to be her father. Jessica and I developed a routine, daily check-ins, shared locations, detailed logs of every concerning incident. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance. During my next therapy session, I asked how I felt about my ex potentially going to jail. I started crying. Part of me wanted him to face real consequences, but another part felt sad about the total destruction of what I'd thought our family would be. My therapist said it was okay to feel both. 2 weeks later, Detective Anderson called. The DA decided to file obstruction of justice charges. Around the same time, Judy published a follow-up article on digital stalking and coercive control, using updated details from my case. Reading it, I felt like maybe something good could come from all this pain. The emails flooded in the next morning, lawyers, advocates, offering consultations, connections. I forwarded them to Emmeline. That afternoon, she called again. My ex was trying to negotiate a plea deal, offering to plead guilty to reduce charges to avoid jail time. The DA wanted my input. My stomach twisted. A trial meant reliving everything in public. A plea deal meant he might get off easy. After multiple sessions with Emmeline and my therapist, I finally knew what I needed. I called the DA. I'd support a plea deal only if it included mandatory counseling, strict probation, and a formal admission of wrongdoing in open court. I needed him to stand up and admit what he'd done. The plea negotiations dragged on for weeks. Jessica organized a small support circle for women like us. It gave me something positive to focus on. Detective Anderson called again. He'd finished his investigation and was returning my seized devices. He showed me the tracking software purchase records, the detailed logs of everywhere I'd been for 6 months. It made my skin crawl, but he said the tracking evidence had been crucial. We've seen too many situations escalate to violence because nobody intervened early enough. 2 days later, Emmeline called with the news I'd been waiting for. My ex had accepted a plea deal, 2 years of supervised probation, mandatory domestic violence counseling, continuation of supervised visitation only, and a permanent restraining order. The deal also required him to formally admit in court that he'd engaged in witness intimidation and destroyed evidence. It wasn't everything I'd wanted, but it was more than I'd expected. The plea hearing would happen within 2 weeks. I told her I'd be there. I needed to watch him say the words out loud. The morning of the plea hearing, I put on the same navy dress I'd worn to our custody modification hearing. My mom offered to come, but I went alone. I sat in the gallery, 3 rows behind the defense table. My ex sat next to his lawyer, his shoulders hunched. The judge called the case. When she asked if he admitted to engaging in witness intimidation and destroying evidence, he mumbled something. The judge told him to speak up. He repeated it, louder, mechanical and resentful, like he was reading from a script he didn't believe. But he said them. He admitted it. The judge accepted the plea, issuing stern warnings about the consequences of any future violations. Walking out, I felt a strange mix of closure and leftover anger. Part of me had wanted him to fight it, to give me the satisfaction of watching him lose in a trial. But the practical part knew this was better. Faster. Less traumatic. The financial pressure eased as the court-ordered legal fee reimbursement came through. $3,200. Enough to pay my mom back, to put a small cushion in savings. I also picked up a steady freelance contract. Elise Jasmine turned 2 on a sunny Saturday. I threw a small party in my mom's backyard. He wasn't informed, but the visitation supervisor sent photos. Watching her blow out her candles with Jessica's help, baby Jasmine sleeping in a carrier on Jessica's chest, I felt grateful for how far we'd come. The road had been brutal, expensive, traumatic. But we'd survived it, built something stable and safe from the wreckage. A few months later, Jessica texted me about meeting at the park. Our daughters mostly ignored each other, playing side by side. We sat on a bench in the shade, and I thought about how strange it was that something good had come from all the terrible things that happened. Not that I was grateful for the trauma, but I was grateful for Jessica. For our daughters growing up knowing each other. For having someone who understood without me having to explain. The supervised visitation reports kept arriving. He showed up late, spent most of the visit on his phone, seemed uncomfortable when Elise Jasmine cried. He left early. These reports gave me a complicated feeling: vindication, sadness, relief. The guardian ad litem called me in early April. She'd observed 2 sessions. Elise Jasmine showed no signs of attachment to him. The guardian recommended visits be reduced to once monthly. I thanked her, feeling a little lighter. The court approved. I felt guilty about how relieved I was, like I should want her to have a relationship with him. My therapist reminded me that prioritizing Elise Jasmine's stability and my own mental health wasn't selfish. I started browsing apartment listings. My mom kept saying there was no rush, but I felt ready for my own space. I wanted Elise Jasmine to have her own room. I signed a lease for a modest 2-bedroom. Moving day was exhausting, but good. My mom helped. Jessica brought housewarming gifts, including a top-of-the-line security system. We spent the afternoon unpacking, the girls playing with empty boxes. By evening, it looked like a home. The restraining order came up for renewal. Jessica and I went to court together. My turn came. I presented documentation of his continued attempts to contact me, his violations, concerns about his stability after losing his job. The judge granted the extension without hesitation. Jessica's hearing went the same way. 6 months after the plea deal, the counseling facilitator's report arrived. He'd attended all sessions but showed minimal engagement, little insight into his own behavior. He completed the program because it was court-ordered, not because he wanted to change. This kind of report wouldn't help him if he tried to modify custody again. The supervised visitation would continue. I hung up, letting it sink in. He would probably never be a real father to Elise Jasmine. On an ordinary Tuesday evening in my own kitchen, I'm browning ground beef for tacos. Elise Jasmine sits on the living room floor, building towers with wooden blocks. She knocks one over and giggles, then starts stacking them again with serious concentration. The apartment smells like cumin and garlic. I can hear my neighbor's TV through the wall. This is it, I think, stirring the meat and watching my daughter play. This boring, peaceful, unremarkable Tuesday evening. This is what I fought for. Through all those court dates, police reports, and legal fees. The hypervigilance is still there sometimes. That quick spike of fear when I hear unexpected footsteps, or when my phone buzzes with an unknown number. The legal battles left marks that probably won't ever completely fade. And I still check the locks twice before bed, and keep my phone charged at all times. But we have this now. This simple routine, where the biggest drama is whether she'll actually eat her vegetables. And that's enough. It has to be enough. And somehow, it actually is. What would you have done in my place when you first saw that name on the hospital bracelet? Have you ever had to fight for your peace and safety like this? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.